All right, we are live here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Welcome everyone to our second live draft show here on our Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com YouTube channel. I just made Tim and Lance listen to that song over and over again, so they're probably about ready to talk playmakers here. Tim, of course, our draft expert, NFL draft expert. Lance, I'll call you an NFL draft expert too, as you are our film guy. I love it. We get to bring in different perspectives. Tim is going to have some analytics stuff for you a little bit later about how he looks at running backs, and Lance is going to tell us all about what he sees on film. It's a great mix. I love talking draft with you guys. It's creates some new perspective. So today on the show, we are going to be talking all about playmakers, and specifically offensive playmakers for that could be available for the Cleveland Browns, guys that they may end up picking. And we're going to go through some guys we like, and we're going to start at the very top of this draft. And the name we have to start with is a guy that has been getting a lot of buzz. There is some talk that maybe he is the direction that the Browns are leaning over Shedeur Sanders. Of course, there is the novelty of the two-way player, Travis Hunter. And so, Tim, I want to start here. Well, let's just spend some time on Travis Hunter. Let's spend some time on what you think of him on both sides of the ball. We're talking about him on the receiver side because next week we're going to talk about the defense, but we're going to really focus on kind of the pass rush in the front seven. So I want to spend time on Travis Hunter here. Where do you think he's best as a prospect, at receiver, or do you think he's a cornerback, or is it just all around?
I think he honestly could be as good as he wants to be on either side of the football. I mean, I truly believe, when you look at what I call world-class athleticism, I mean, the fact that he could play 100-plus snaps every single week in the mile-high altitude of Boulder, Colorado, more than half his games of the season is just an incredible testament to the kind of athlete that Travis Hunter is. And what sticks out with me, obviously, ball skills, world-class ball skills. I mean, that's why he's so good on both sides of the ball, is he identifies the football and he can make a play on it. And I mean, I don't think there's a limit to the creativity a good coaching staff can use when they get Travis Hunter. If they draft Travis Hunter, for example, with the Browns, certainly can use in two ways. But it felt like prior to the NFL Combine, all the momentum was about, what kind of corner Travis Hunter is. But then as soon as Andrew Berry started talking about how he viewed Travis Hunter as a receiver, it felt like more people kind of caught on to that bandwagon that, this guy's a really good receiver. And thinking about it more, other than quarterback, almost nothing is more valuable than an elite receiver on a rookie contract. Because, I mean, we see what those receivers are getting paid, $35-40 million. And as valuable as a corner is, they're not getting paid more than $20-25 million bucks. So the fact if Travis Hunter is as good as advertised on offense, and I think it was Matt Miller of ESPN who said he could be an Odell Beckham Jr. on offense or a Denzel Ward on defense, if you can get prime healthy OBJ on the Cleveland Browns, a guy that you find a way to manufacture 10 touches for a game at minimum, whether it's bubble screens, handoffs, crossing patterns, anything basically to get him the football. I mean, that's a guy that creates an offensive gravity that the Browns really haven't had a receiver in a very, very long time.
So, Lance, I don't want to spoil our pod next week. I know that if the Browns don't go Shedeur Sanders at 2, there is another player you like at number 2, maybe better than Abdul Carter, better than Travis Hunter, a direction you would go. But as far as Travis Hunter is concerned, how do you view him? Wide receiver, cornerback, both? And I guess the former coach in you, when you hear like two-way player, and you were coaching at the high school level, so I'm sure you had a lot of guys that were two-way players, or a handful of guys that were two-way players. How do you view that in the NFL? How much do you think a guy can actually do that at the next level?
Well, it's funny. In terms of conditioning-wise, it's faster in college. I'm not saying the players are faster. I'm saying the tempo is faster. So in terms of conditioning, I think he would be okay. He played 100 snaps, like you said, Tim, in high altitude. For me, when I look at Travis Hunter, I see an elite corner, and I think we'll know. I think he's a great receiver too. But here's what I think it comes down to. What are the Browns doing defensively, and are they addressing if they don't think they can get more pass rush, right? Because if you can't get more pass rush, for me, then Travis Hunter is a corner. And the reason why is because you're going to bring 5 and 6 then, and then you go man coverage even more than you like to, even more than Schwartz does. So if they don't, really improve that pass rush either internally or trading, or just if they have to bring 5 or 6, then you got to play more man. So I think he's an outstanding corner. Now, as an offensive coach, as a high school coach and being very familiar with two ways, we try to always do 1.5 ways, if that makes any sense. So what we would do is we say, where are you going to get rest? And if that's what it comes down to, he's a unicorn and he's an outlier. So where do you want to get him rest? And I think you can get him rest on offense, because I think, like Tim said, he's a touch guy. So I'm not teaching him a position. I'm teaching him touches. So on the top of my call sheet, I had guys that would play. They would line up at receiver, running back, tight end, you name it, but they didn't even really know they were there. They just knew they were getting touches. So for me, he's a defender. He's, the idea of having Ward and Hunter at your corner really frees you up to bring more pressure if that's the route you're going to go. And then offensively, I think you can, like you said, you don't have to overthink it with him. Get the ball in space. He's a green grass guy. Get him in space, let him touch the football, let him do what he does, and don't make him overthink it, because he's going to have to do a lot of that on defense. Just let him touch the ball on offense. You can get him packages. You can do different things with him, but I see him as a 1.5 way player. I think he will play both, and I think he'll be a corner, and then he'll be a touch guy, a 10 to 12 touch guy on offense.
Yeah, it almost seems to me like that would be the easiest path forward, right? Because when we start talking about how a guy's going to spend his day too in that building, you can't attend every single meeting. You just can't be in every cornerback meeting and every wide receiver meeting. And I do wonder, is it a little easier to, I'm going to be primarily a cornerback, and then, like you said, Lance, I'm going to get a certain percentage of snaps on offense, where I'm going to have, different packages that are available to me, things that I can work on and study on my own even, right? Like it seems like it's a little easier to go that direction. But it was interesting, Tim, when Andrew said at the combine that he views him as a wide receiver. Now, I think he backed off of that a little, just like a tiny bit, because I think it was maybe gaining a little too much steam for his liking. But I thought that was interesting. And there's one thing about Travis Hunter. This is also fascinating. I can't imagine there's anyone out there that isn't completely fascinated by the possibilities of this. I do think you have to be a little bit careful to make sure you're falling in love with the actual football player and not the novelty of what he can be. Now, I think the actual football player is really, really good, like an elite prospect. So I'm not doubting that. But I do think if you make this pick, you've got to make it because you love the player and not maybe love the novelty of, ooh, here's a two-way guy. Because there might come a point in 4 or 5 years where maybe you do have to really pull back on one to benefit the other.
Yeah, and I mean the way I've thought about it with Travis Hunter is, people say he may not be. Like, some people think he's not the best receiver, the best corner. My thought process is he's really good at both positions while kind of dividing his time almost 50-50. So you can imagine, just like, say, if he devotes himself, say he's getting 80% of the snaps at receiver, and then in corner he's basically playing fourth quarter situation, third downs, red zone possessions, stuff like that. You're spending a much more time in one position room than the other. Naturally, you're going to get better at that position than the other. And again, I think for me, it goes down to the fact that, he's just a different guy. You said the term unicorn. It's something that I think we throw around a little too much, but with Travis Hunter, I really do believe it is. I mean, I've said he's a generational athlete. Like, by that, I mean, he's a guy who you could throw him in any Olympic sport, give him a year to learn it, and he'd probably be competing for a medal. I think that's the kind of athlete Travis Hunter is. And I forget what show this was on, but someone was asking him about how he would devote his time, between offense and defense meetings. He was basically like, I need 8 hours to sleep. I got 16 other hours to fill. I got 16 hours to spend time in both meeting rooms. So it's a guy that I feel like you can never tell him that he can't do it. And that's the biggest thing. I go back all the way to when he was recruited. He was committed to Florida State all the way up until signing day. I remember doing the live blog on this for cleveland.com that, there were whispers that all of a sudden he was going to flip to Jackson State, and everybody thought that was crazy. And then all of a sudden it happened. And then he goes from Jackson State to Colorado the last 2 seasons to potentially the first non-quarterback off the board. I just feel like, as much as we want to pigeonhole Travis Hunter into being, okay, he's only going to be a receiver, he's going to be only a corner, or you want to give him a certain percentage of snaps, both areas. I feel like of anybody that you could ever ask to do this kind of thing, Travis Hunter might be that one guy, because he just seems so determined to do it, and he's just going to be like, I'll show you.
Yeah, and Lance, I do want to, again, I am fully on board with the two-way player, but when I just say you need to make sure you're falling in love with the player and not the novelty of the player. I think that's important. But Lance, when you just look at Travis Hunter and everything he brings, what if they did split that? What if they went the opposite way that you were saying, right? So instead of cornerback and wide receiver, they went heavy wide receiver and cornerback. What would that look like for you?
Well, then I think you got to bring him in. There's a couple different things you can do. You can say, you know what, when you're in, we're going 10 on 10, and we're going to throw you on the best receiver, and you're always going to be in man, because then you work man techniques all the time. So if you think he's that good, if he's the kind of guy, he's Dion, right? So he's over there, he's Revis, he's taking away a guy. Then you limit what you're doing with him in terms of coverages and understand, or you put him at nickel and tell him take the slot, and you're in man coverage on the slot at all times. So I think if you're going to play him, if you're saying more offense, obviously then you want to get him involved in different schemes and high lows and smashes and over unders and all that kind of stuff that they do at the NFL level. So that would be important. And then on defense, you'd have to limit his thought process, in my opinion. You'd have to say, you know what, when you're in, you're going here. You got Chase, but that's what makes it so good is that they have Ward too. So you could say, you know what, you're going to be in the slot, or you're going to go, you just make his rules very simple. Let him line up in man or off man, and just let him play. And you let him play. You don't overcoach him. You just let him play on defense and take away a guy. Like you said, I think you're right on in terms of you just got to figure out a way where are you going to rest him. What's more beneficial when you rest him? And obviously you can rest him on offense a little bit more, I think, because of the fact that you're not touching the ball all the time. So I don't know. I would go if it was me, I would say he's going to start a corner, and we're going to find packages for him. And then if it gets to the point where he's so good, then we'll move on from there. But let's get him some touches on offense, punt return, maybe some just touches, whatever they may be, punt returns, all the things we talked about. But I would definitely, wherever you're going to find rest, that's not even rest. Where you're going to rest his mind, I guess. Let him clear his mind and get coached up when things go wrong. Because in the NFL, though, this is the first time in his career he's going to be challenged athletically. That hasn't happened yet, and that will happen on Sundays.
Yeah, I mean, the concern is obviously the physicality of the game at the NFL level. And I think, if you did make him primarily a receiver, you would maybe be able to take him out of some of those run responsibilities on defense too, which I think is so now he doesn't have to tackle Derrick Henry. He doesn't have to come up and make these plays that we see Denzel Ward have to make all the time. And they're about the same size. So Travis is a little taller, but they're about the same weight. So those are kind of the hits that you don't want him taking at corners when he has to come up and play and run support. So that would be the case for wide receiver. So before we get into the rest of this group, I'll just ask you guys, we just did a whole show last week about, hey, take Shedeur Sanders at number 2. Seems like the momentum is going away from that, but I just want your thoughts. If 2 Thursdays from now, Roger Goodell goes up there and announces Travis Hunter as the Browns pick, what do you think, Tim?
I think I said at the end of the season, basically just take a guy from Colorado. I don't necessarily think it matters. If it comes down to this, if you like Shedeur Sanders and you think he's got, top 15, top 10 quarterback potential, take him. If you don't, take Travis Hunter. And it's pretty simple. It's basically, for me, almost a 2-player conversation. We'll talk more about this next week, get to defensive players. I just think with how historically bad the offense was, you can plug in a guy who's an easy yards guy, a guy that creates offensive gravity in Travis Hunter. And I think if you can't get that elite quarterback in this draft, or a guy like, maybe we'll talk about later, we talked about last week, Jalen Monroe, a guy you have to wait on, maybe have him develop. Certainly having a guy who's just an electrifying player in Travis Hunter, at least as a stopgap to create some attention and allow you to do some gimmicky things, certainly in the interim while you focus on other things, certainly is not a bad idea. It's a pretty good plan B, honestly.
Lance, what about you?
Well, we'll talk about next week. If some was available on 2, I would take something else. But in that same, I would not be shocked. And I think he's. It would tell me honestly that they have a different plan at quarterback. Maybe they are going to trade for somebody, or they have somebody in mind for the next year. Because like I said, you can't win without a quarterback in the NFL. You can't win without a quarterback at any level. But elite talents are really hard to find, and corners. I will just say this as a offensive coordinator, it's easier to stay away from a corner than it is a defensive lineman if you can get a generational defensive lineman. Generational defensive linemen are absolutely game wreckers when I'm trying to call plays, and I would be willing to bet that a lot of coordinators would feel that way too. A lot of coordinators would feel the way about a corner though. So not saying, but for me, I would, if I'm the offensive coordinator, I'm staying away from him. So you can't stay away from a defensive lineman. But if you're going to use him both ways and you feel he's generational, he was fun to watch. So we'll see. What you were talking about defensively, that's one of his weaknesses is his ability to tackle. He likes to stick his nose in there. He's not afraid at all. That's not good at the NFL level when you're a corner, because those are big humans and you're not talking afraid. You're talking availability. You have to be available. And those big guys, and you're hitting those big guys, that could be a problem for him just because he's fearless.
Okay, let's see. Looking through some folks before we get into these wide receivers. Here's one you guys will love. Our buddy Ryan, who was with us last week. He's a big Travis Hunter guy, also Jackson Dart. So Ryan, I remember Ryan was not on board with our Jackson Dart conversation. Shout out to Paul from Cuyahoga Falls too, who said hello right up the road from me, Paul. So appreciate you coming in here. And we're going to go through some of these wide receivers and some guys that we like as we move forward. So here's what we're going to do. I asked you guys to identify two of your favorite wide receivers each that the Browns could take. We're focusing on mostly second and third round guys, or guys that we think could be there. Well, I mean, it could be a little later in the draft if there's somebody you want to pound the table for. But we're not talking like the very, very, very top of the draft here with these wide receivers. Guys the Browns can get day 2 on. So, Tim, why don't you throw out our first name here?
Going down the road to Columbus, Emeka Egbuka. I think for me, he's kind of in a tier set behind Travis Hunter, who's in his own tier, and then Teteroa McMillan from Arizona. Those two guys are in their own separate tiers. Egbuka is kind of in that tier with Matthew Golden and Luther Burden III as far as like who's going to be the third receiver taken in this draft. For me, with Egbuka, 6 foot, 202 pounds, pretty much anybody in Ohio has seen him play for a long time. Basically, I think I joked about this before on Sports of CLE. It's like if Ohio State took Jackson Smith and Jigba, cloned him, and put him in a time machine and sent him forward a couple of years, that's basically what you have Emeka with Emeka Egbuka. They're almost the exact same player. With Egbuka, there's fluidity. He's incredibly capable of getting space for himself. Even looking at his numbers, I was looking through some of the draft guides. He has 15 red zone touchdowns, which as a receiver who's 6 foot, that's not easy to do. Usually you see that stuff reserved for guys who are about 6'3", 6'4", guys who are jump ball specialists, not guys who are 6 foot. That tells you the fluidity in Egbuka's game. Now, there's a concern that maybe people don't think he has a high ceiling because he's not super fast, but I think at his OSU Pro Day, I think he had a sub 4.5 40, so he proved to me that he's fast enough. And I think in an era where we're starting to get more star slot receivers like Jackson Smith and Jigba again, or Amon-Ra St. Brown, Egbuka may be that next guy that kind of fits that mold. So he's one of them for me.
Lance, you were texting me about him earlier. This is a guy that I am leaning towards, and you can't get too crazy with, locking yourself into a position at a spot. But I still feel like number 33 is that perfect spot to land a really good edge rusher, or maybe trade back a few spots and still get a really good edge rusher. But he's one of those guys that I have on that list that if he's sitting there, at the end of Thursday night, I might just consider running that card up as fast as possible and not running much clock on Friday when the Browns go on the clock at 33.
Well, Egbuka, like you said, he's been nothing but consistent. When you leave Ohio State as the all-time leading receiver, you're pretty good. I've heard that they have some pretty good receivers there. So I think he's a guy that, he's consistent. He's very good catch rate. All those things you talk about. For me, I think of a receiver in 3 ways, right? If he's not a touch guy, then he's got to be a guy who releases off the line of scrimmage, both zone and man, which is outstanding. He's got to be good at the catch point, and he's got to be good yards after catch. He's not outstanding yards after catch. He's good. He's maybe not great off the line of scrimmage. I do worry about him getting jammed, maybe outside at the 1. I can see him being in the slot. There's different ways to get people off press, put him in the slot, motion him out, do a bunch of different things. If a guy's not super in the short area, which when you watch him when he's out at 1, sometimes he can get jammed by really athletic corners who are really good with their hands. But he's a big, strong kid, super, super, super consistent, and can do a lot of different things. He's a true receiver. And, inside out, whole route tree, Egbuka is a really good football player.
And I have the Beast pulled up here, which just came out the other day, just so we can reference that. Number 4 on Dane Brugler's board among wide receivers, actually right behind a receiver that I know Lance is going to bring up here at some point, which is an interesting ranking. 6'1", 201 pounds, and number 28 in Dane's top 100. So kind of in that range where maybe he could fall out of the first round. Maybe he could be there at 33. We'll kind of have to see if there's a run on wide receivers, because I've seen, Tim, different scenarios where maybe there's like 2 receivers that go in the first round, and then other scenarios where once that run starts, once those guys start coming off the board, some of these teams, they start grabbing them.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. I think this is a draft that feels like from 20 to 55, maybe more so in the 30s to 40s. It's kind of interchangeable as far as where you can put guys in this draft. And I think what it would come down to is, does Shedeur Sanders drop out of the top 3, and does he go past New Orleans at 9? If it does, we're talking about chaos, and maybe teams like the Browns and the Giants trying to move back up in the first round, or somebody like that trying to make a move for quarterback. So if you're kind of looking for chaos, that's kind of where it is. But so many edge rushers in this draft we'll talk about. It's just going to come down to kind of teams' preferences on draft night, and that's all it is. I mean, there's just it's maybe not as likely that Ibuka gets out of the first round, but if he does, and I take my quarterback, for example, and I have the 33rd pick, it would potentially take me a lot to get me off of that picking Ibuka right there.
Okay, let's just as Lance takes a drink of water, Lance, why don't you go ahead and give us the first guy you want to talk about?
My guy, when you talk about receivers, so Mbuka, Tet, Trey Harris, there's a lot of guys I have higher than my guy Luther Burden out of Missouri. But for me, I'm taking him because I'm going with Browns, not only athleticism they need, I think they need an influx of impact players. And receiver-wise, I do this with both my receivers and my running backs. He's not a traditional receiver. In fact, his route tree is probably 1/10 of what the route tree would Mbuka runs at Ohio State. But this is a touch guy. This is a guy in space. We're talking about 100, but we're talking about a guy who's 200-plus pounds. So he can give you a little bit more of the, you see him coming out of the backfield. He runs jet sweeps. He would be outstanding in the slot in terms of he's your +1 guy. So if you're going to run RPOs, you just run a little bubble screen with him. Just keep that 7th backer out of the box. There's different things you can do with Luther Burden. But the big reason I like Luther Burden, much more than the numbers or the route tree or the technique or, even the way I break down receivers in terms of the 3 levels, for me, they need a guy who gets them easy yards. Right now, the Browns have to go 10 to 12 plays each time they have the ball without mistakes. And we saw last year that's hard to do, right? Even at the NFL level with offsides and holdings and things like that. There's just so much talent at the level that you got to have once in a while a guy makes a play for you. You got to have once in a while where you don't block it right and it doesn't matter, right? You just throw it up and a guy gets it. That's still important in football. As detailed as football is, and it's crazy detailed, you need a guy who can get you some easy yards and easy points. So I don't think he's not my top receiver in terms of how I break down receivers, but he's my top touch guy. Him and Hunter, obviously, but he's my guy in space. Give me some easy yards, give him a big play. You get a 60-yarder, and all of a sudden you're rolling. And that's what I think. For me, that's why I went with Burden, just his ability to make plays in space, run after catch.
If you're out there and you really want to watch a good Luther Burden game, go watch the LSU game in 23. He puts on a show in that football game. But I like Burden. Again, I think I'm with you, Lance. I don't view him as like, if you're taking him, he's like absolutely your wide receiver 2. He is more of that versatile guy, but that's sort of a guy that Kevin Stefanski, who loves to talk about Percy Harvin and loves to talk about those versatile, give him the ball any which way you can guys. He's been looking for, they tried to make Elijah Moore that, right? And it just didn't work. And sometimes to his detriment. I think in my mock draft today, on the offensive side, I was doing an offense defense for each pick. I had Luther Burden, and I said, it's a tool Kevin Stefanski wants in his toolbox, even if he pulls it out of the toolbox a little too often. But he's been looking for a guy like this, Tim. And I think Luther Burden checks a lot of those boxes if you want a guy that you can just sort of line up all over the place and just really be a chess piece in your offense.
Well, there was a time early in this 2024 season when Luther Burden was considered a top 10 prospect. I mean, that's how highly thought of he was. He just took a step back in 2024 just in terms of production. But with Burden, I think he's an interesting case study because I keep feeling this is one of my soapboxes. We undervalue the slot receiver tremendously. I think in football in general, I think in a spread offense universe that we're living in right now, you need a dynamic slot receiver. And at 200 plus pounds, Burton's what I consider a power slot guy because he's bigger than most slot corners, and he feels like a guy you could just have him run 6 or 7 crossing routes, kind of like when you would run, for example, in college football 25 all the time. I know I do, and just let him, run for 6-7 yards after the catch. And Lance, you were talking about those yak receivers that the Browns don't really have a lot of. When I did my 7-round mock for Thursday morning, I really had a hard time deciding receiver because I went with Jaden Higgins, but then I was kind of torn by some of the yak guys like Luther Burden, Jalen Royals, Kyle Williams, Jack Besh, some of those guys, because that's what the Browns don't have. So I do love that fit there. And I do think if you're getting 2023 Luther Burden, that is an absolute steal if he's there early in round number 2.
Oh, you said the name Jaden Higgins. That's one of my favorites. I'm letting you guys do the cooking here. I'll throw out some of my names a little bit later. But Jaden Higgins is one of my guys here. If the Browns, that would be a guy that, again, maybe I wouldn't take him at 33, but I'd maybe trade back if I could get him a little bit later in the round, pick up another pick. I'd be interested in that. Tim, why don't you throw another name at us?
Well, this was one looking at the chat. Budgie32 guess the name. I think he's probably, some of these guys are looking at my notes here because I got his Jaden Higgins teammate Jalen Knoll from Iowa State, 5'10", 194 pounds, kind of like Ibuka. I think he's got high-end slot ceiling as a receiver. I mean, this is a guy who was number 1 in the country last season in deep ball yards per PFF, 609. So this is a guy who can make big plays, flies down the field, quick, like I said, fast. His hands are great. And what I think is interesting, there were a couple catches where he's a smaller guy, but he's catching the ball with 2 defenders around him. So this is a guy who, even though he doesn't have a big catch radius, which is always a concern with smaller receivers, he trusts his hands to go and pull the ball down. And that is a really good trait to have with a guy like Jalen Knoll. Plus, he's got value as a kick returner, punt returner, and as good as Jaden Higgins is, Jaden Higgins is kind of the steak of the Iowa State passing game. Jalen Knowles the sizzle of the Iowa State passing game. And I feel like the Browns could use a little sizzle. And that's why I really like Jalen Knoll. I feel like if he might be a late 2nd round guy, 33 might be a little early for me a little bit, especially if Ibuka and Burden are still there. But, even early 3rd round, I'd be hard pressed to pass on the electricity of a Jalen Knoll.
Yeah, just to be clear, we're not talking about, not all of these guys are like, hey, I'd pick this guy at 33. Some of these might be 3rd rounders for whatever. We're all over the draft with this group. To me, Jaden Higgins is kind of your Cedric Tillman test. Like, if you really believe in Cedric Tillman, you're probably not taking Jaden Higgins. But if you want to bring a guy in who could maybe compete to be a number 2 kind of quickly, that's where Jaden Higgins comes in. I think Jalen Knoll kind of fits a little more snugly if you really want said Tillman is your guy. And Tim, I mean, I was looking at my notes on him, and you kind of hit on a little bit of what I had here. That punt return ability is important. And then you said sizzle. I just have a note here that says there's some juice after he catches the football. Lance, this is a guy that, again, the Browns need so many things in that receiving core. They're, it's really Jerry Jeudy and then a lot of question marks, I think. So anything like, whether it's a Luther Burden or a Jaden Higgins or a Jalen, like, there's any skill set really I think can fit in that wide receiver room right now.
Well, yeah, and he does. He brings the juice, right? So when you talk about, once again, for me, this is all about can I do limited things and get big results out of it? Can I give you, can I throw a hitch for 5 yards and it's 17 yards? Can I throw a under route and he breaks a tackle and gets 26? And those, can we get some chunk plays without having to block for chunk plays? And that's when you talk about what helps a quarterback. Get it to 2nd, 4, 2nd, and 5. What helps a quarterback? Throw a hitch, throw an RPO, throw a quick slant, throw those quick things, and then that guy goes and makes play for you. And then everybody's kind of rolling. Then you got it going. But that's where when people say juice, it's not always a home run. What it is it's a chunk play where you don't have to do much and you don't have to block a 7-step drop, or you don't have to, deuce double the 3 technique to the backside backer. It's just, you just get a guy who's got some athleticism in space, and he makes a big play for you. It's a game of momentum too. So that I agree. It's just a guy who, with the ball in his hands, can he do something? I think that's what the Browns need. I know Jerry Jeudy's good. If said Tillman, if they like him, then you get a guy in the slot, and then you get a good tight end, and you can go 12, and you can go 13, and you can go 11. You can do a bunch of different stuff like Kevin likes to do. So I still think they need a guy, whatever these guys we're talking about, a very deep class for me in terms of some guys that could do that. So, yeah, I think Noel's a really, really good player. Two really good receivers out of Iowa State.
All right, Lance, who's your second guy?
Well, this is a day three guy. This is a day three guy that comes down to watching film for me, and that's Xavier Restrepo. Now, the first thing everybody's going to say, I could care less about his test scores. I could care less how big and strong and fast he is. Watch him on film. And when you watch him on film, he's a guy in the slot. He's got a lot of limitations, breakaway speed, things like that. But what he does is he understands space. He understands green grass. He understands zone coverage. He works very good when you watch him in terms of when he's in man coverage. When teams are in man on him, he works the backside shoulder. He works the blind spot. He closes the gap on defenders. And what I mean by that is he gets close to that defender so he has a two-way go, left or right or vertical. He separates from guys who we all talk about in terms of corners with elite speed. He has great football speed. And I always say football speed comes from understanding where you're supposed to be. So you can play fast if you're not thinking. And Xavier Restrepo is a guy who plays whatever his 40 time is, that's what he plays at because he understands what he's seeing. I like production. I know it's late and the Browns like to take guys who have great potential, and I believe in that as well. But sometimes there's guys who are just better than their measurables. Some guys, you watch him on film, you go, God, that guy's not that good. And then you play him, and he just destroys you because he's a really good football player. For me, Xavier's 200 receptions at Miami. Xavier Restrepo, I understand all his limitations, and I'm on board with those. But I like football players too, and this guy is a football player, and I think the Browns need some of those too. So you need a guy with juice, and then you need a guy who's irritated. And when you're a guy like Xavier Restrepo, everybody tells you how slow you are. Everybody tells you how that gives you that kind of that Cooper Kupp edge, right? That ability to get open. You understand things. So he's a day three guy. I'm glad he ran what he ran because I think he'll be available on day three, and that's a good thing. The Browns are looking for a football player.
Look, I mean, sometimes when you're doing this, obviously you look at the testing numbers and that stuff matters. And I mentioned this earlier, Tim is going to get into some stuff with running backs that can sort of forecast success. But sometimes you just have to watch a guy and be like, I just like this guy. I don't know what it is, and maybe he didn't test great, but I just like this guy, and I can see him fitting. And listen, the Browns have 4 6th-round picks and a 7th-round pick. If Restrepo's there, maybe you do take a chance on a guy like that could come in. And again, in Miami, Tim, I mean, you're betting on what you saw in Miami translating to the NFL and kind of throwing any visions of we're just taking traits guys on day three, which is where Andrew Berry leans, but it's not always that. You're taking a chance on a guy that was just productive.
Yeah, I mean, even looking at the notes from Dane Brugler, the first positive he says about Restrepo is his toughness. And it goes back to what you said, Lance. I mean, just a pure football player. Those are guys that you want to have in your corner. And not every football player is a great tester. I say with NFL Combine stuff, a lot of times I try to tell myself to take a lot of these results with a grain of salt. Sometimes guys just have bad days, for example. Gunnar Helm, like I said before a couple weeks ago, I think he sprained his ankle running the 40, and that's why his testing numbers of the combine were so negatively skewed because he sprained his ankle on a false start. So maybe he just had a bad day or something like that. Who knows? But when you watch Miami, there's a reason Xavier Restrepo was a favorite target for Cam Ward. He's just reliable, found a way to get open, found a way to make plays. And you need guys like that. I mean, yeah, the Browns could use some explosiveness on offense. I mean, I still think Cedric Tillman's going to be very good, and especially he showed a lot with Jameis Winston as his quarterback. But I mean, just getting more tough guys in that, receiver room is a big thing. And remember one of the last guys the Browns got who was not a good tester, but was a really tough guy? Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, you would take that. Now, also, David Bell, very productive in college, and hasn't obviously worked out here. But that's the stuff you're taking a chance on. And if you're taking a guy in the 6th round, I mean, a lot of those guys aren't going to hit. So you're rolling the dice on all of those guys. So I don't hate it, Lance. I love it. Throwing guys out there. Okay, let's lightning round here. One other player that you guys want to mention, kind of a sleeper or just a favorite for any reason. Tim, we'll start with you.
Again, I've said this before. Rocky's stealing my guy. Rocky's also stealing my guys. Torrey Horton from Colorado State, 6'2", 196. Missed the end of the season last year with a knee injury, but this was a guy who's lightning fast. I think Thane Brugler had GPS data that clocked him at a high speed of 22.5 miles an hour. That's incredibly fast. So with Horton, the guy with punt return value, 3 careers, 70-plus yard punt return touchdowns, fluid, quick, and he's cut down on drops. And the biggest thing I saw with him, like I said with Luther Burden, get this man on crossing routes. Get this man, get him going across the field. See if you can drag a slot receiver or a linebacker on, give him the football, and let him go to work.
Lance, who do you have?
All right, my guy is, I can make sure I say his last name right. Loved him today. I watched him all day today. Monterey Baldwin from Baylor. Broke him down looking for jitterbug.
This is a shock because I don't think you've even sent this guy to any of us.
So here's what I was looking for today. So I'm trying to, when you said like, hey, let's find some guys who probably won't even be drafted. He's 5'9", he's 170. He's a fidget, but he's a guy you lose a game of tag in a phone booth with, right? He's a guy who is sudden, twitchy, can return punts, can return kicks, and you just don't know his level of ability in space. You don't know how he's going to release at that size. Can he be a slot? This is purely a guy who can I'm trying to stick with my theme here with receivers in terms of easy yards guy. I'm not sure at that at that size if he can do it, but he's a guy I really like on film, and he's a guy that I got to watch today. And Monterey is a guy who is he's sudden, he's twitchy. He's all those terms that you hear about in terms of a slot receiver, the old school slot receiver. So probably won't be drafted. Somebody might like him just because of those, if you think about a slot offense, if you think about getting the ball out quick, West Coast, quick slants, bubble screens, McVay style, things like that. I just really like the guy. I try to find guys that I just like on film and not listen to or hear what anybody else says about him and just kind of have my own thoughts. I like Monterey Baldwin out of Baylor.
Well, that's how you find these guys, Lance. That's how you find your Ivan Paces and guys like that. I mean, if we're throwing guys out like that, I do want to say, when I watch Luther Burden, I think to myself, I wouldn't hate Theo Weiss Jr. as maybe a 6th-round flyer if he's down there. Okay, so obviously, look, we're not mentioning everyone. We will do a mock draft later where some other names might come up that we can pick. But I want to throw one guy that I really like at you guys. I'm sure I've texted to you about him, Lance. I know I've texted to you about him. He's in the mold of that Luther Burden receiver, probably a day 3 guy, tested like crazy though. Ran a 4.3, 4.40 at the combine, a relative athletic score, 9.56. Jalen Lane, Virginia Tech. Every time I see him catch the football, he makes the first guy miss. It's just every single time he makes the first guy miss. Versatile, probably just a slot guy. You're not going to line him up outside a ton. But you're bringing him in to be a slot guy, and I think he's like a perfect slot guy on day 3, athletic. We're going to talk about a little bit about this when we get to running backs. I kind of hate that Virginia Tech offense. So, I think he was maybe, I don't want to say he was hindered by that, but I think there's more there than what we saw. So Jalen Lane, and again, another guy that has return ability as well. He returned punts throughout his college career. He was at Middle Tennessee State before Virginia Tech. So I really like Jalen Lane as a potential day 3 guy. That's the guy I'm planting my flag for. We are going to take a break here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Believe it or not, we have 2 other positions we're going to get through. Running back is going to feel a lot like what the discussion we just had at receiver. Tight end, we're going to move a little bit quicker. There just aren't as many guys there. And then we're going to do a mock draft as well at the very end of the pod. So quick break. And when we come back, we'll hit on the running backs. Good news is no break if you're watching us live on YouTube. So we're back right away. I do want to tell you, though, if you are watching us live on YouTube or listening on the podcast, please check out our socials. If you're not watching on YouTube, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com is where you can find full podcasts. The full video versions of most of our podcasts go up there. We're going to be doing a lot more live content. Next week, we'll do our defensive draft podcast. At some point, Mary Kay and I are going to do a Hey MK live. We're seeing a few comments in there already about people loving that we're doing this live. So we like to do it too. It's just kind of another thing. Right now, we're doing that pretty much on YouTube. So that's Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Find us on Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk. Our Twitter account, Orange Brown Talk. That's where you can find that stuff as well. And of course, Football Insider. That's our subscription where you get a newsletter every day. You get access to those stories that have that subscriber exclusive tag at cleveland.com/Browns, and you can become one of our texters also. So that's cleveland.com/Browns. There's a big blue banner at the top of the page. Click on that. to join up. All right, we're going to do running backs now. And this is obviously another area where the Browns have a clear need. Right now, Jerome Ford, I mean, there are other backs in that room, but it's pretty much Jerome Ford in that room right now. Nick Chubb is still out there as a free agent. I know a lot of Browns fans think it might be time to bring him back. I don't disagree with that, but even if they did, they'd have to add a running back. So, Lance, we're going to start with you this time. Who's the first guy you want to talk about?
All right. So I'm going to say this before I get going on my back. So I have Travion Henderson as my number one, not Genty. People are going to lose their minds on that, but here's why. Genty's a violent runner, and when you're a violent runner, those guys usually don't have a lot of tread. They don't last very long. So Travion Henderson is my number one guy, but the guys I'm picking for the Browns are guys who they're going to be boring, and they're not going to be high on a lot of people's list in terms of, how high would you take them? I'm trying to get to second and 4, second 5, second 6. And that's going to make my transition at quarterback better. So my first back is a zone runner, Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. And the reason I like Caleb Johnson is his ability to put his foot in the ground and get vertical on the weak side zone. He can run the gap scheme. Iowa does a great job up front in terms of their zone blocking, which is if they're going back to Stefanski's run scheme, that weak side zone to the two-man side is going to be a really good play for Caleb Johnson. Again, Caleb Johnson probably doesn't have that breakaway speed, but what he gives you what makes calling plays a lot easier when it's second 5. At second 5, now that defense has to play base. That defense has to stop, run, and pass. It's almost like first down. The Browns have to be better on first down. Browns have to throw the ball better. All the things that you're talking about offensively that need to improve, it starts with winning on first down and getting to second 5, second 6. And that's what I love Travion Henderson. I love all the backs that we all know about. I love those guys too. But my focus for our pod tonight was what backs get me to second 6. And my first one that pops into my head without question is Caleb Johnson out of Iowa.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting there. Rocky in the chat. Lance, you just kind of answered this. I do want to take a real quick detour here. He wants to know who you think will be the better NFL back, Judkins or Henderson. Lance, of course, just said that he thinks Henderson is the best back in this class, better than Ashton Genty, better than every other back. I don't think we should let that slide. I think we should, when you put that out there, we got to make sure people hear it. Lance really is a Travion Henderson believer. Tim, I tend to agree. I think Henderson is probably the better all around. Like if I'm looking for just a featured back, it's Henderson. I love Judkins and what he brings. There's a little Kareem Hunt in how he runs. There's a little nasty in how he runs. But I would lean Henderson. I think you're okay with either guy, though.
Yeah, I mean, I would go Henderson over Judkins because I just feel like there's the higher explosive ability with Travion Henderson. I mean, anytime you get in the ball, handoff, passing concept, anytime for that he's basically a threat to go all the way to the end zone. And with Quinshon Judkins, I think Lance, you were kind of talking about the violent nature that Ashton Genty ran with. Quinshon Judkins does that. I think where Genty kind of has that edge is it felt like he created more for himself than Judkins. Not that Judkins isn't going to be a very good running back. I think he's going to be a good NFL running back, but I think where Judkins kind of fits best is the power component of a tandem. Like if you have your traditional power speed combination going all the way back to the days of Reggie Bush and Lendale White at USC, I think that Judkins would fill that Lendale White role.
Okay, Tim, I do want to get your thoughts on Caleb Johnson. It feels like there hasn't just been a lot of buzz around him, but this is just a really good runner.
Well, I feel like there hadn't been a lot of buzz because we've all talked about him. I mean, at some point you run out of good things to talk about, and I guess this is a good time to transition into one thing I will say about, you were teasing about earlier, the analytical measurement that, for lack of a better term, is what you're trying to find for a cheat code to find running backs. It's part of a series I'll be doing next week. I've teased this term before. It's called explosive run rate. How many times are you gaining 10 or more yards per carry? And, Pro Football Focus has this data going all the way back to, I believe, the 2014 season. I charted a lot of it. So when Lance says he's looking for guys to get to second and 6, I look at it as, what if I get a guy who every 6 or 7 times he touches the ball, he gets 10 or more yards? So if you're on YouTube, you can kind of see the chart up there. So what I did was I took guys who were in this draft class and I went to PFF, found their data, 10 plus yard runs, which PFF does a great job measuring, divided by their total carries. And then you're going to see over here their explosive run rate. So that's a percentage right there. And Caleb Johnson, his is pretty high. I got him about 17.92%. And for a comparison's sake, that's better than what Dalvin Cook had in his draft season in 2016, better than what Devon Achane had in 2023, Kenneth Walker in 2022. And this is what I find is there's all kinds of analytical trends that say if you can get 10 yards or more often than not, that's a good sign. And that means you're making offense easier. If you can chop away a 10-yard segment of the field every 6 or 7 times you touch the ball, that's just as good, I think. If you're getting a 60-yard run, say 3 or 4 times a season, if you can get 10 plus yards 2 or 3 times a game, you're really helping your offense out there. And I think Caleb Johnson's a guy who can do that. Not like doesn't have super top end speed, but I think power speed combination, great patience. I've seen some Le'Veon Bell in his game, and there's a lot to really like about Caleb Johnson. Plus, there was so much attention on him at Iowa, and he was still so productive there. So that says a lot about him. Plus, Iowa native, Hamilton, Ohio guy from Southwest Ohio.
Okay. Sam has been waiting for this moment.
No doubt.
That was one moment he's been waiting for to show us that spreadsheet, which I've been using a lot this week to kind of get ready for this. This is really the moment Tim has been waiting for. Now you could throw a curveball here and go a different direction, I guess, if you want. But Tim, you know where I'm going here. Which running back do you want to lead off with here?
How many hours do we have on this podcast? I'm just kidding. I'll just go ahead and go with it. Cam Skattebo from Arizona State, 5'9 and a half, 216 pounds. This is one of my man crushes in this entire draft. I mean, we talked about it before. I feel like this is a back where if you go back in a time machine 15 years, this is the back every AFC North team wishes they could have. You know, you're talking one of the most violent runners out there, incredible contact balance, you know, just hard to bring down on first contact, and he runs with high-end energy. Explosive run rate last season, 15.31%. For comparison's sake, that's higher than what Brian Robinson Jr. had his last season in Alabama, 14.76%. And I kind of threw him in there because comparable body types. They're not the same. I don't think they're the same runner, but there's some similarities as far as the profile. As far as Skattebo, what I like also, in addition to the explosive rate, he creates plays for himself. Second among all, this is all from PFF, second among all running backs last season in missed tackles force with 104. I think Ashton Genty somewhere in the 150s. So that's the only dispute I would have about the Henderson-Genty debate is Genty just creates so much for himself. And if you take it down to missed tackles forced per run, Skattebo is still third in the country at 0.35. So that's one of every 3 runs, Cam Skattebo is breaking a tackle. That's something special right there. Not to mention, he was third among running backs in receiving yards last season. So he looks like this old school power bowling ball type running back, but he's really dynamic out of the backfield. And the game, I think, that got everybody's attention to realize, you know, he's not just doing it against Big 12 guys. He's doing it against one of the best defenses in the country, Texas in the Peach Bowl. He had 242 yards of total offense, 143 rushing yards, 99 receiving yards. He rushed for 2 touchdowns. Oh, and by the way, he threw a touchdown pass in that game. Yeah, that actually happened. There are concerns with Cam Skattebo. People say, you know, he's not super fast. And, like, I get that. You know, 4.6540, kind of what I think everybody expected. But I went back and on Relative Athletic Score, they do, you know, athlete comparisons. The first one that popped up was Kareem Hunt, and his 40 time 4.62. So and then the dovetail back to the explosive run rate thing, we all kind of sunk the Bucky Irving draft stock when he didn't run a good 40, and all he did was lead the NFL, lead rookies in rushing yards last season, explosive rate 18.28%, one of the highest that I've been able to measure. So with Skattebo, I just think that there's such an aura around him. I mentioned to Dan, you know, just hearing him talk at the combine, you know, he really has this aura about him, this presence about him. He said before that, you know, you know, every time he ran over a kid in high school, he would do the Ric Flair woo every single time. So he's kind of got that personality to him, that guy that, you know, he would be a fan favorite for anyone he goes to. I truly think he'd be a guy where, you know, whatever team he goes to, the beat writers are going to love talking to him because he's just going to be such an interesting guy. So there's so many layers to unpack with Cam Skattebo. I've had someone on Twitter, every time I tweet about him, tell me that he's Tommy Vardell from back in the 90s. That's a throwback. But I think with Skattebo, there's so much more to him than meets the eye with Skattebo.
Lance, during my days at Kent State, I was an English major. So I had to take some poetry classes, where you wrote poetry sometimes, you studied poetry. That was poetry
That
from Tim
was
Bielik right there on
that
Cam
that
Scattaboo.
You're welcome.
that goes into the that might go into the Ivan Pace vault of man crushes right there. That goes. I tell you what, that was well done. I don't have anything.
Well,
I don't know if I have anything to offer there. That's fantastic.
Well, it was me and the college football universe. I think everybody I follow in college football was always tweeting about Cam Scattaboo, and then watching the Texas game. I'm like, I'm sold. That's all I need to see.
I've got to say this with Scattaboo, and I mean, and opinions on him. When you look at the draft experts, they're all over the board. He's pretty low on Brugler's big board and his running back board. PFF loves him. I think they have him. I got to look. I actually looked here while Tim was talking, but I got distracted because it was so good. They have him third in their running back rankings. So he's kind of all over the place. And I'll just say this: there are times, Lance, when you watch Cam Scattaboo, and you're like, every time this guy touches the ball, something good happens.
Well, it's funny. I was just received some messages in terms of like Genty's the best back and Scattaboo, and when I say my reservations about guys like Scattaboo and Genty have nothing to do with their talent. If you watch those guys, they are so good. For me, that's simply maybe the coach in me. Those violent style running backs, they're hit or miss in terms of injuries at times. That's all. Obviously, everybody in the NFL, but Scattaboo and Genty, those guys are violent runners. When you see those guys, if you see some of those runs that in the playoffs that Genty had and Scattaboo had, those are violent runs. Those guys are exhausted at the end of games. It's just really hard how much tread you have on your tires. And, I don't think they can change their style. It doesn't mean they can't be successful because they're both really, really good. But Scattaboo's a guy who does everything well. Again, he's a guy, I don't care about measurements. I have a chart of don't care about measurements, and he's on it. And he's on there with Restrepo in terms of watch the film. He does everything well. They do a really nice job at Arizona State with their run game. He spearheads everything they're doing. He ran against a lot of 7-8 man boxes and did a really nice job. He's violent in his pass protection. His only, just like with Genty, one of his weaknesses is his greatest strength, and that's taking contact. And when you go down, and I say this to everybody all the time, when you go down there and you see inside run with just the O-line and the defensive line, and you're up close and you see the Eagles defensive line versus the Browns offensive line from 3 years ago, that's a violent sport down there. And it's just survival. Can you, if you play that way, how long can you survive? And there's, he's one of those guys, he's fun to watch on film. He does everything well. And, it's funny how fast these guys are because they seem to run away when they're on the field. And that's the most important thing to me.
All right, Lance, give us your second guy.
My second guy kind of ties into what I've been talking about in terms of getting to standing above the sticks, and that's Damian Martinez. And I think he'll be a late day three guy. Started at Oregon State, then went to the U. He's a guy who has pretty good speed. He's about 220 pounds, 6'1", 220 pounds. But what I like about him is just he's heavy. And when you see him run, he constantly leans forward. And some guys have that forward lean. And if you think about like Jerome Ford is a guy who hits a home run. I thought he got a lot better as the full-time tailback last year, but I think where he could be really, really exceptional is in a third down situation. And even though Damian Martinez is a natural catcher of the ball, he didn't catch it a ton. He's a really good heavy back, and for his size, he's got some pretty good shake to him. But he's another violent runner. But he's a guy, because of his not raw speed, he gets you to second six. And that's kind of my thought process with this. We're going to have either a rookie quarterback or a transition quarterback, or the Browns are going to play great defense. My whole thought process on the ability to play great defense and break in a new quarterback, if that's what they're going to do, is you have to set him up for success and not set him up for failure. And that running game, in terms of getting it to second six, is vital. You go from, when you look at those big call sheets all those coaches have, when it gets to second six, that whole thing is open. And that's important in terms of trying to protect your quarterback and trying to protect your defense. So again, I think he's a day three guy. He might be a late day three guy, but I really like him. And I think it shows you the depth of this class at running back. Big physical guy. My thought, once again, kind of a theme with my running backs is just who's going to get me to second five, second six. I think Damian Martinez does that.
So it's interesting you bring him up because, again, as I was just sort of doing homework this week and freshening up on some of these guys and watching guys, one of the guys that I've really really gotten to like over this process is from Virginia Tech, Bashul Tutin. Really explosive back, like really explosive. And I watched I'm just going to tell everyone out there, we were talking about this before I hit record. If you want to have an interesting 3.5 hours, go on Google, search Miami, Virginia Tech full game, and watch that YouTube video. I've watched it, I don't know how many times, just trying to watch different guys and just trying to keep up with, just trying, because I can't watch like 5 guys at once. I don't have the attention span for that. So go watch that football game and you won't be disappointed. There's like breaks where they're just showing what's going on, like in between commercials and all of that. So you won't be disappointed if you're watching that game. But he's a guy I love, and I wish that I could take a little bit of Damian Martinez's kind of down to down running and combine it with Tutin's explosiveness, if that makes sense. Because I think Tutin is really explosive in that second level, but the down to down can be a little bit, sometimes he doesn't get those easy yards on first down or second down, like you're saying. So that's the one thing about Martinez, Tim. I don't know how explosive he is into the second level, but I think he's a really good runner.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. But Damian Martinez explosive rate 15% his last season at Miami, so the data kind of backs that up. And then you slightly better than Jerome Ford is 14.95%. But where I think Damian Martinez kind of makes up for, looking at PFF's guide, second in the country in yards after contact per attempt, so 4.51. So that tells me there's a little bit of sledgehammer in his game. That tough runner. And I think Lance said, the falling forward guy. That's one of the most, I feel like, I've never coached defensively ever, but I feel like if I was, that'd be the one guy I'd be the most annoyed about, a guy who just always falls forward. That's guy, especially in the NFL, that's got to be the most annoying thing, that you can never get him for a loss. He's always going to fall forward, get that extra half yard, that extra yard even, and a guy who's always going to finish plays. So that's what I think about with Damian Martinez.
Tim, it's just you and I now.
Should we just keep going?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, who's your? If you go, let's go. If you had a sleeper at running back, who'd you go with?
Well, I was going to get my second guy. Was
you got your second guy. Who's your second guy?
Yeah, DJ Giddens from Kansas State, 17.48 explosive rate. Dan's coming back, by the way, little behind the curtain stuff. So DJ Giddens, I was talking about, 6 foot 212. Explosive run rate higher than what Miles Sanders had, his last season, 17.27%. And when I see Giddens, different back from Scadaboo, I think with Giddens, burst and fluidity are the two biggest things that stand out with him. Like, he gets at the top speed very quickly. He may not always show his top speed. I think he could run with a little power, but he's got a great cutback ability, which I think plays well in a zone block scheme. When you want that one cut running back, that's what DJ Giddens really does. And I've seen a lot of Rachaad White comparisons with DJ Giddens, and Rachaad White has certainly proven himself as a pretty good, above average starting running back. And Giddens is a guy that I think is late third round potential. And I think if you can get him to run with a little more authority, a little more juice, that's where I think you can really have something there with Giddens.
All right, I'm back. I got booted off. If you guys didn't notice, it sounds like we're talking about DJ Giddens here, Lance.
Yeah, we kept going. We're like, let's just keep moving.
You guys are pro. You guys are such pros. I don't even need to be here. I might just take the rest of the night off.
We just kept it moving. Yeah, I agree with you. He's a great zone runner in terms of. I think the White comparison is very good in terms of I don't know if there's a lot of in the whole shake in terms of ability to make people miss, but he's really. He's productive. He can catch the ball. Really good athlete in terms of like being able to do multiple things. So again, not a guy that I have huge on my chart, but when we watch the film, it's a really deep class in terms of running backs. And there's so many different styles of backs depending on what the Browns feel they need and where they're headed with the scheme. And people always say, you got to make sure you take the best players. That's a fine line for me, because you can make sometimes guys who are marginal players, like I don't say Giddens a marginal player, but you get a guy like him with his ability in the right scheme, all of a sudden he's not marginal. So yeah, very good player, very good Very good choice, as always, Tim.
Okay, let's run through our sleepers here. Lance, who do you have?
I'm going to go staying with the theme. I'm going Khalil Mullins out of Michigan. And once again, former linebacker, tough. I'm thinking first and second down. Once again, I am no means am I talking. The whole philosophy today was what gets me to, like I said, what gets me to second and manageable. And Khalil Mullins is a guy, hard runner. I don't think he'll break a lot of runs in the NFL, but I'd be willing to bet he'll average 3.8 to 4.2 a carry if he had 10 to 12 carries a game, which is what you want out of him, right? Get you to second six. So again, trying to help my quarterback, trying to protect my defense, rely on my defense, move the clock, shorten the game. That's where the Browns are at until they get this quarterback situation figured out. And Mullins would be a guy that you can get late in the draft that is probably going to be pretty productive at the NFL level.
Tim, who do you have?
Jarquez Hunter from Auburn, really high up in the explosive rate chart, 22.58%. For me, that's third in this class, right behind Travion Henderson at 25.52%. RJ Harvey from UCF, 23.38. Not the highest on the list. I got Boston Scott there from 2018 all the way up there, 27.37%. But with Hunter, 5'9", 204, compact, and it shows in his ability to break tackles. Above average speed, but where he really excels is just finishing. He is not afraid of contact. He finishes runs with just a lot of energy. And the SEC, that's saying something. When you're doing that against SEC defenders, it speaks a lot of volumes out there with Jarquez Hunter. Ninth in yards after contact per run and missed tackles forced and per PFF. Fifth in missed tackles forced per run. That's 0.317. So slightly more than one of every three runs he's breaking a tackle. And he just feels like a similar to Cam Scadaboo, just runs with just relentless energy. But I think with Jarquez Hunter, why I think he's probably going to go mid-day 3 guy, even though Dane Brugler has him sneaking into day 2 as far as his board goes. He's not a very elusive guy. Like, he really is not going to be a guy who makes people miss. He's just going to find space, run to it, and in some cases run through people to get to that space. But there's value in that, especially when you look at what the Browns have with Jerome Ford as your speed piece of a running back tandem. If Jarquez Hunter, there's no mistaking about it. He is a power back through and through in the way he runs.
When you watch him, his legs don't stop moving. Like, the legs just do not stop. Really good runner. When I saw you put that name out there, I got excited we were going to talk about him. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw out like a couple of guys that I really like. I'm going to give you my one sentence pitch on these guys, and I'll let each of you maybe pick one to talk about. So Lance knows this, and I think Tim, you know this too.
I know this one.
I love Jordan. Well, I could go a couple of ways here. I love Jordan James from Oregon, and I know he didn't test well at the combine, and I know that hurt him. But my one sentence on him: watch him run against Ohio State in the first game. Watch him run against Michigan. The guy can run the football against two of the best run defenses out there. Trevor Etienne, guys, somebody on day 3 is going to be ecstatic when Trevor Etienne is sitting there, and they're able to draft him on day 3. Let me see if there's anybody else here that I want to pitch to let you guys react to. I think we've hit on everybody. We're going to use a mock draft simulator that I'm going to tell you right now because I've used it before. Omarion Hampton is going to be sitting there at 33. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's another guy that's on my list of if he's there at 33, I'm running up to turn on the card. But just quick thoughts, guys. Trevor Etienne or my guy, James Jordan.
I can talk
Jordan James, I should say. I mix up those NBA names all the time.
That's fine. Yeah, I'll talk Jordan James just because I was on the Bucky Irving train earlier, and I don't want to make the same mistake that I think we all did with Bucky Irving because, I mean, again, he was the only 1,000-yard back in last year's rookie class, and his explosive numbers, I mean, you look at it, 18.28, that's slightly less than what Alvin Kamara had in his draft season. Now, Jordan James, not as high, but still very good, 16.74%. That's better than what Jahmyr Gibbs did in his last season in Alabama. I'm not going to sit here and say Jordan James is better than Jahmyr Gibbs. That's not what the ERR data is about. It's about basically the correlation between how many times you're getting explosive runs in college and success in the NFL. And that's typically for later on guys. Tyron Tracy, another guy. We could show you the chart later, but James, I think I keep thinking of Bucky Irving in some ways with Jordan James. Maybe not. I don't know if he's going to be as good as him, but I think I see some similarities as far as the kind of players they are. So maybe it's a diet Bucky Irving, but I do like Jordan James, though. I mean, very noticeable the first time, Oregon played Ohio State. He was really good in that game. And I mean, Ohio State really did not play defense well at all that game. But Jordan James, you got to give him his flowers on that game. He was really good.
I also want to add a guy I did mention earlier is Tootin from Virginia Tech. Just he gets to the second level. He's got that gear. That's what Nick Chubb had in his heyday. Like if he does break through the line, he's got another gear. He just runs away from guys. Lance, any comment on either of those guys?
Well, Etienne's your guy, so he has been your guy for we've been going back months now and throwing names at each other, and like every fourth or fifth text you throw an Etienne in there, so I know that's your guy. And then what I did is it made me watch a ton of him. He is really good. I think he might have the best vision in the draft as a running back, just pure vision in terms of what he's seeing, which at the NFL level is so important. And what it tells me is that how well coached he was at Florida and at Georgia, where his NFL, because his ability to read those blocks and know where the double teams are coming and where the double teams are coming off. It tells me he has a great understanding of the defenses. Cutbacks come from reaction and athletic ability, but they also come from understanding what you're seeing. And when you're in high school and you're in college, you kind of get the ball and go. When you get to the NFL level, you got to understand where your double teams are coming off, where the zone blocking, what the defensive scheme is going to be, et cetera, because that's going to kind of give you a pre-snap. And then you got to react to, obviously, post-snap. But he's in the top 3 or 4 in terms of seeing in his vision and then attacking it and pulling that trigger. So Etienne's your guy for sure, and he's really good. So. I knew you were going to slide him in there, though, for sure.
We got to round up in our last one of these pods. We just got to round up who all of our guys are. They got our guys we're planting flags for as we go through this process. Okay, we're going to take another break here. We got 2 more things to do. We got to talk tight ends, and then we got to do a Browns only mock draft. So we'll do that here starting on the other side. And back on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, Dan Labbe with Tim Bielik, Lance Reisland talking NFL draft. We're talking offensive playmakers, so wide receivers, running backs, and now tight end. So this is a very interesting position. We're not going to go quite as deep, but I know there are guys that you guys specifically want to talk about. So Tim, why don't you lead us off here? Let's go like one each, and then maybe we can just sort of throw out some names that with some guys that maybe people can keep an eye on as we go along. Tim, who's your first guy up?
Well, I did warn Dan and Lance a little bit that I changed my guy. I was originally going to talk about Gunnar Helm from Texas, but when I did in my 7-round mock, I decided to go with a different tight end, and that's Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, staying with the Oregon trend. 6'5", 247 pounds. Going back to what I was saying about explosive run rate, another thing that I realized, and doing more research on this sort of thing, in addition to explosive run rate being a correlation to NFL success, there's track records of tight ends saying that the faster you're timed in the 40, there's a better chance for NFL success. So, and then the guy who ran the fastest 40, Terrence Ferguson, 4.63 40 at 6'5", 247 pounds. That's really good. Guy who can make plays after the catch. PFF had him as number 1 in yards after contact after the catch with 9. And this is a guy who, when he gets the ball, there's no nonsense. He just goes straight up the field and goes to make plays. He finds space for himself. Probably needs to work on a little more nuance to his game as a route runner, but there's a lot of great athletic tools with him. And he's also got a lot of productivity. 30 catches and 375 yards in each of his last 3 seasons at Oregon. So this is a guy who's been productive with multiple different quarterbacks, was productive with Bo Nix the last 2 seasons, and then in 2024, Dylan Gabriel. So productive tight end, maybe not a great blocker, and certainly that's not an uncommon thing, though. I mean, you could say that for about 95% of tight ends that enter the NFL is you got to work better as a blocker. So that's not an uncommon thing. But I think with Ferguson, if you're going back to the Kevin Stefanski style, 2 tight ends, this is a guy who maybe has a little more juice than Harrison Bryant would. And then if you got a speedy second tight end pair of David Njoku, you can create a lot of different matchup problems.
Lance, your thoughts on Ferguson?
Very well said, Tim. So I think what he does, those inline blockers, when they say they struggle with those inline blocking, that's because the guys they're facing, right? So in college, you're facing defensive ends for the most part who are either speed guys or power guys or heavy guys. In the NFL, you get that combination. So now a guy can beat you with speed and power and strength. So it's just the idea of getting used to it. And if they're willing, they can usually do it because they're good athletes. Now, what I like about him and his 11 personnel is that I think the Browns tight ends, they have to, with Njoku, whoever they are, they have to be able to play some different spots, not only at tight end, but maybe a little bit of fullback, because then you go 12 personnel. If you look back at Harrison Bryant, I was much higher on Harrison Bryant for what he did for the Browns formation flexibility than what he did stat wise. Harrison Bryant gave you a lot of options in terms of getting nickel in the game or getting regular personnel in the game. And when they got rid of Harrison Bryant, that was one of the issues I had was how do you dictate the personnel you're going to see on defense? And that's what that's what Ferguson would do. Ferguson's a guy who can play in the slot. He creates matchup problems. The old 12 personnel, remember, 12 personnel gives you 2 tight ends. Do you go regular personnel with 3 linebackers, or you go nickel with nickel backs? And then you run the ball if there's nickel, and you throw it if it's regular. That's kind of the generic, philosophy of it. Ferguson's a guy who's real, athletic. Things he doesn't do very well, he'll get better at the NFL. And they're not asking these NFL guys to block in line like they did 25 years ago. So that's kind of, I don't want to say it's outdated, but it's definitely not outdated with the Browns. The Browns guys got to be able to put their hand on the ground and do a little bit. They got to be able to pin guys down on the pin and pull scheme. All things Ferguson can do. Again, I really like this tight end class. I think there's a lot of really good tight ends, and Ferguson's one of them. But for me, tight end was my favorite position breakdown when I broke, 15 guys deep. They were all great to watch.
So Lance, give us your guy here.
My guy's Harold Fannin, and he's a guy that I like a lot. And once again, his stats were out through the roof, right? 117, 1,500 yards, but that's not what does it for me. It's what Kevin Stefanski wants to do with 12 personnel. Similar to what Tim is saying, Harold Fannin would really have to be able to play that fullback spot occasionally on power when they insert a guy on their outside zone, which I'd like to do sometimes. But what Fannin does for you is if you're going to get in regular personnel, he's going to kill a linebacker, especially in that slot. Now, Kevin Stefanski is the master of going 13 personnel, so I wouldn't be shocked if they got another tight end. But what 13 personnel does is that it's for sure going to get you heavy personnel. And a guy like Fannin then is going to get a matchup that he's going to win. And that's where Kevin Stefanski's best matchup designs come from, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, right, philosophy-wise. But if you can get athletic tight ends like Fannin, Ferguson, guys who can block a little bit and learn how to block a little bit, you got to stop the run and you got to bring in some big boys. Then you split those guys out, and now you got the matchups you want in the pass game. So Fannin is dynamic. He's the best run after catch guy I believe in college football this year at the tight end position. Had some really good games, had some big catches against Texas A&M, runs away from some guys. Played very well against the big teams, obviously dominated in the MAC. He's 240 pounds, 235 pounds, so he's kind of a unique kind of outlier. But he's, again, a guy that can do things when he gets the ball in his hands, which is something the Browns need. And if they're going back to this personnel groups that Kevin Stefanski likes, he'd be an interesting puzzle piece for me.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time on Fannin last week, too. I think, did we end up taking him in the mock draft? I can't remember, but we did spend –
I think we did,
we spent a lot of time on him. So – I'm going to throw this name out there because this is probably my favorite day 2 tight end. A guy that has played a lot of football, 3-year starter. He's not even 21 yet. He might be. I don't know when he turns 21. It's soon. Really young guy, great bloodlines. Jason Taylor's kid. To me, when it comes to this tight end position, I'm probably not taking him at 33. But if he starts to slide a little bit, if I've got an opportunity, I think Mason Taylor is my favorite day 2 guy. He'd be the top of my day 2 over Fannin, over Elijah Arroyo. Now, I like Fannin and I like Arroyo, but there's something, Tim, about Mason Taylor that I just like watching him play football. I think he can do all those things that you need him to do. I think he can line up where you need him to line up. I think he's closer to being a really good blocker than maybe some of these other guys might be right now. So I really like Mason Taylor, and if he is, again, not the top tight end in this class, my top day 2 tight end in this class, if the Browns could somehow land him, I think he would be a perfect fit on this football team.
If there's one thing I love when talking about prospects, and one thing I say that has so much value, it's NFL bloodlines. And if you're Jason Taylor's son and if your cousins with Zach Thomas, at least I think that's right as far as the lineage goes.
Yeah, he is related to Zach Thomas. I have to look up exactly what it is, but yeah,
I'm not up to date with the Thomas family tree. I may have that very wrong. It might be his uncle, possibly. So I apologize to the Taylor family for getting the family tree wrong, but I've always said NFL bloodlines matter. They absolutely 100% matter. And with Mason Taylor, I do think there's a lot there. I mean, he was a big steady tight end at LSU's good production. I think his only touchdown, I'm trying to remember what year Jane Daniels beat Alabama in overtime. Was it 22 or 23? I can't remember, but
I
that's,
can't
I
remember
think,
the year, but yeah, he had obviously made the big plays in that game.
yeah, steady tight end. And I think, speed, that's also really good. They got him measured in the 40 time. Looking it up right now, 4.68, so plenty good enough speed. It's under that 4.7 threshold. I'm just going to pick a threshold of 4.7, and Taylor kind of fits that threshold. Nice, steady, solid second tight end. I don't know how many of these guys are going to be outside of Tyler Warren and Colson Loveland. I don't think many of these guys are going to be superstar tight ends, but you're going to get a lot of tight end twos in this draft class.
Lance, obviously you told us about Fannin. He's your favorite guy, but what are your thoughts on Taylor?
Well, first of all, it tells you my age here because I literally remember watching his dad at Akron when I was playing. I broke it. I remember watching him on film. And when you see an NFL guy, when you're an average college player, you know the difference when you see a guy like Taylor, because it was just like, he's just different, right? And obviously, I think that bloodline means a lot just because you're around it a lot and you understand the time commitment. You understand there's a lot to be said about that. A lot of guys, when they go to college, they struggle with the amount of hours putting in, and then they struggle when they go to the NFL. And the idea of playing well in a game or in practice, now you have money, you got to take care of yourself, got to take care of your body, you got to move your family, you got to do a bunch of things. And when you're of that bloodline, besides just the athletic ability, a lot of the other stuff is important too. You know how to take care of your body. Obviously coming from pro, you've had resources in your life. So I think that's important. Really like him. He's got a great frame. And I think you're right, Dan. He is the most, probably besides Warren. But if you see Warren sometimes too, I broke him down a ton. Warren's not a great inline blocker right now either. He's good and he'll fight you, and he's an ogre when he gets on you, but he's not technically super sound yet. Mason Taylor might be the most technically sound guy with his hands inside, inline tight end. So, and a guy you can split out, a guy you can do a bunch of different things with. I agree. There might not be a lot of Hall of Famers in this class, but there's going to be a lot of guys that play next year and have some success. And if you're a tight end, if Kevin Stefanski's calling plays again, this is a great offense for you.
Okay, let's lightning round the rest of this that you guys wanted to talk about. Tim, did you have other? Who are some other tight ends? I guess the Browns fans should know, whether it's day 2 or day 3.
I'll stick with the NFL bloodline theme for my other guy, Oronde Gadsden II from Syracuse, former converted receiver, 6'4", 4.5", 241 pounds. Another good speed guy as far as the tight end goes, 4.65, 40. The son of Oronde Gadsden, who played 6 NFL seasons with the Dolphins, got his numbers, 3,200 plus yards, 22 touchdowns. So a solid NFL career. This is a guy who's long. He's got great body control, and he can make some contested catches. They had him measured at 17 contested catches in 2024, second among tight ends. So I think if you're looking for a pure receiving tight end late in the draft, somewhere in the middle of day 3, I really like Oronde Gadsden. He may never be a guy who's a great blocker because there's questions about how he's going to grow into his frame. And he may kind of just be that flex tight end, kind of that big slot, that hybrid slot receiver type. Maybe never be a guy who's leading the way for a running back. But if you're looking for a flex receiver option, just kind of a big receiver, maybe eventually he becomes a blocker, that might be Oronde Gadsden II.
Lance, who you got?
Luke Lachey, Iowa. I love Iowa tight ends. So what he's going to give you, he does need some work. He's 6'6", he's 250. But what he gives you is that when you're at Iowa, and I say this all the time, you're blocking NFL zone. You're reaching that 9 technique. You're doubling. You're getting to the next level. They're so good up front. Friends with those guys, they do such a nice job up front in terms of running that zone concept. They run some gap scheme. He didn't have big numbers. Iowa's offense was very, 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 very poor, especially throwing the ball. Luke Lachey, 2 things that I know. One is he's going to be very tough. He's going to be position flexible. He'll put his hand on the ground. He can play in the slot. They split him out. He caught slants. He caught, he did a lot of things out at the number 1 receiver. If you think about where Tillman lines up, he did a lot of that at Iowa. Now, they didn't throw the ball very well, but in terms of can he handle it athletically, yes. And if you play at Iowa, you're going to be tough. You know how to block. You put your hand in the ground. That's important to you. A lot of blocking is want to. And when you're at Iowa, you want to block. And that's what really, you're talking in the NFL, these guys are all legit. When you think about Njoku, when Njoku came from Miami, he was not a very good inline blocker. David Njoku can block now. Why? Because he got with guys who made it important, and he made it important to himself. So I think Luke Lachey is a guy coming from a program that values tight end and tight end play in terms of route tree, blocking schemes. The learning curve coming to the NFL as a tight end from Iowa is a lot shorter than other schools. So I like Lucas Shea. Obviously, doesn't wow you with a lot of measurements, but besides his size. So, but he'll be around day 3, and I think he's a guy who's going to have a really good NFL career.
I think there's some, again, just like running back, even at receiver. I mean, this is one of those positions that's going to have some value on day 3. Maybe you're not getting, again, if you're looking for maybe a surefire starting guy, you probably got to do it on day 2. But you can find some value on day 3. I mean, I have a note here. I have some notes here about Jake Brenningstool from Clemson, right? Like mostly a guy who's a zone beater, lined up a lot outside, but that's a guy, if you bring him in day 3, you can probably turn him into something over a few years. So this is a pretty deep tight end class. We're going to take a break, and we're going to do our mock draft. 4 rounds, Browns only. Number 2 pick is already in the books. We've committed to that. We're doing a different player each week at number 2, and then we'll go from there. So quick break, and then back on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. No rest for the weary, though, because we are back here live on YouTube. Welcome back. If you are a podcast listener, once again, we're going live with these every Thursday night on YouTube, 6:30, whatever time we can kind of hammer out each week, trying to go live with some Hey MKs. I don't want to promise anything on draft night necessarily, but just stay tuned. Maybe we'll try to do something live draft night, not like a live draft show, maybe a live reaction, something like that, but no promises. But we will be doing a lot more live content here. So you should get subscribed to our Orange and Brown Talk Browns channel. It's actually a shared Browns channel, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. And also, follow our Twitter, Orange Brown Talk, because we're going to get hopefully up and streaming on that at some point too, whatever platforms we can go on. Make sure you check those out. Okay, I am going to share my screen here, and we are using the aptly named this week. We used PFF last week. We are going to use the aptly named NFL Mock Draft Simulator at the NFL Mock Draft Database. So nice and easy there to find. It's actually what I used when I put up a mock draft today. So like I said, we are locking ourselves in each week to a specific number 2 pick. So last week it was Shedeur Sanders at number 2. Next week it's going to be Abdul Carter at number 2, although Lance might argue with us about that a little bit. We'll see. Let's just say we're going to do a defensive lineman at number 2 next week. I think even my dog is arguing. I don't know if people can hear that or not. And today, of course, we are locking ourselves into the guy that we led the show off with, Travis Hunter, at number 2. So I'm going to find the start button here on our draft. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, this is shared. If you're listening on the pod and you want to watch, you can go ahead and head over to our YouTube channel where I put up the full pods. So hopefully me getting booted off won't ruin what that video looks like. So hopefully I'll be able to put that up for you if you want to watch this live. But we're going to take Travis Hunter here at number 2, and the draft is going to grind along here as we move ahead to number 33. You guys can kind of see some of the names that are climbing the board and coming off the board at 33. We'll also try to be as realistic as possible. So if we think there's a guy there at 33 that maybe doesn't seem like he would actually be there, we might pass on him. But we'll talk through that when we get there. And I think we're going to do no trades again, just because that overcomplicates things. So here we are, even though we got a ton of trade offers, sitting at number 33. And oh boy, do we have some decisions to make here, guys. So Omarion Hampton is still on the board. I had mentioned that if we use this database, Tim, we're probably going to have Omarion Hampton sitting there at 33. I think that might go down as one of those. I'm just not sure. I don't think he's going to make it out of the first round. So maybe we're just going to pass on him out of principle. Jackson Dart, who I know you guys love. Jackson Dart sitting there at number 33. This would be, for some Browns fans, a dream scenario. Walter Nolan, Ole Miss, is really interesting. Defensive tackle. Also spent some time at Texas A&M. Watching him with that Texas A&M D-line a couple years ago was unbelievable. Josh Connerly is who we took last year. And as we kind of scroll through, there's Travion Henderson sitting on the board as well. Tyleik Williams, who is one of Lance's guys. Jalen Milroe is on the board. So we got some quarterbacks here. We've got some guys that I know you guys like. Tim, why don't you? What name stands out to you? And I think we are going to go ahead and take Omarion Hampton off the board.
Well, I think this is where I would not be a good general manager, is because I feel like if you're going to pass on Shedeur Sanders at number 2, I would have extreme paranoia about, who's fearing that somebody's going to take Jalen Milroe earlier than I'm willing to trade up to go get him. Like I keep thinking about the Steelers at pick, I believe it's 21. I mean, they still need a quarterback. They still got to figure out what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. And I feel like for me, this is why I wouldn't be a good GM. I'd probably panic and try and trade up to 20 or something like that to get Jalen Milroe, even though I think he would easily be there at 33. But if I said before, Milroe's my QB3, and I mean, his speed, his running ability is the best trade, I think, of any quarterback in this entire class. So, I mean, I'd be willing to take him all the way up here. I just feel like if you're going to take a swing, or at this point later in the draft, I say it's more of like a lottery ticket than a swing, because the odds of those guys hitting after they get past round one is basically, say, Donovan Mitchell missing a free throw. That's kind of what the hit rate when you're getting to. And with Jalen Milroe, at least you can bet on the elite tool he has. You can bet on his relationship with Tommy Rees. You can bet on the fact that it seems like he's really worked hard on his fundamentals since the Senior Bowl when the Browns got to work with him. I know Mary Kay did some great reporting about that. But I think this would be Jalen Milroe time for me.
We're gonna kill Lance. If this is the time, this is the decision. This would be the decision that would actually end Lance. I think we've overruled Lance plenty. We've told Lance, no, we're not picking your guy plenty. There are some guys here that I just know Lance is itching to take. But I'm kind of with you, Tim, because it's still in the back of my mind, like, okay, but who's playing quarterback for this football team? You can add this and this and this, and we already added Travis Hunter at number 2. Who's playing quarterback for this football team? Now, I am not a big Jalen Milroe guy, so that's what gives me pause with making that pick specifically. I would actually lean towards Jackson Dart. So I don't think we're going to agree on that. Lance, where are you at right now? Are you even thinking quarterback here, or are you thinking let's go get somebody that can help us day one, and we'll figure out quarterback in some later rounds?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not thinking Dart or Milroe here. I'm thinking Tyleik Williams. And the reason I like there's two. I like Tyleik Williams. The reason I like Tyleik Williams is because I think his upside at 335 pounds is what the Browns need inside. I have said this now for a number of weeks. The loss of, the Browns not having that Sheldon Richardson, that huge man inside right now. They need a dude inside. And I think if you're not going to trade down and go for Mason Graham, who I like, you might hear about him next week. Then I like Tyleik Williams. He's my second favorite, him and Grant. But I think Tyleik Williams, I never think you're wrong building from the inside out. And, obviously you need a quarterback. But I also think that argument wins too. So it's one of those things. I'm going to build from the inside out. I'm going to do whoever the quarterback is. I'm going to do my best, because the difference between Dart and Tyler Shuck to me is not a ton. The difference between Monroe and Shuck is not a ton. But if you can get some people around him, make the bubble really nice around him, defensive line, offensive line. So I'm going to go Tyleik Williams.
Let me ask you this, because because he's still on the board. Why Tyleik Williams and not Walter Nolan?
Because of the upside. So I think Tyleik Williams, Tyleik Williams, his ceiling is, to me, like I've always been on the Michigan guys. I think obviously Graham's my favorite guy in the draft more than anybody else. Graham is my number one guy, my number one film breakdown this year. Grant's real close, but Grant plays high at times. Then you put on Tyleik Williams and you watch him over the course of the last couple years, and then you go back and just put on random games, Indiana, Wisconsin. You're talking about a guy who can flat out move his feet in a small area. And then I thought for some reason he was 290 pounds, and all of a sudden he's 330 pounds. There's very few guys who are at 335 pounds that can move like him. So you're talking about a guy who can two gap on first down, and then all of a sudden he can get in the gap on third. He can be in that wide 3 and 5. And he's actually got enough feet where if you like the matchup, you can move Miles down inside. You can move him out to a wide 5. That's the kind of feet Tyleik Williams has. So I just think his feet, and I think his upside. He came to Ohio State. He was 380 pounds, and he got himself into great shape. His best football is in front of him. I just think he's really growing. I mean, he passed Grant as my number 2 guy.
Tim, do you agree with that comparison between Nolan and Williams?
Well, for me, I had Nolan ahead of Williams in my own defensive tackle rankings, but it's close. I mean, I had Kenneth Grant between them, and really, there's a lot of guys in that defensive tackle group that are kind of interchangeable. I actually have Derek Harmon second in my defensive tackles. I just love his absolute ability to disrupt because he's long, he's strong, he's got power. And Derek Harmon really helped transform that, make that Oregon defensive front really elite, along with Jordan Birch, who's another former 5-star prospect, like Walter Nolan, if I remember right, was actually the number 2 prospect in his recruiting class behind Travis Hunter. So it'd be kind of fun to kind of pair the number 1 and number 2 recruits in the 2022 recruiting class together. But having watched a lot of Ohio State, there's a lot to love about Tyleik Williams. That defense was certainly better when Tyleik Williams was out there. There's no question about it. It felt like he always had a presence. He always was just disruptive in the middle. Motor is a big thing that I look for with defensive tackles, and Tyleik Williams has that. So I think with any of those 3 guys, I don't know if you could go necessarily wrong.
So Ken is asking, if not quarterback, how can you pass on Henderson? Which I think is a fair question here as well. And I would just say, I think I can still find, as much as I like Travion Henderson and Lance, you said he's your best back in the class. So you'd be passing on the guy that you would have at the top of that position. I still think, just based on the discussion we had, and there were guys we didn't even talk about, I think I'm finding a good back somewhere in this draft. And I don't know that I need to force a running back here. Defensive line feels more valuable. Obviously, quarterback is super valuable. I would just rather take a higher value position here.
Yeah, for me, I agree with you. He is my number 1 guy, and I think he'll be outstanding. But what the Browns need, I don't want to say I don't know how good Travion Henderson, but I do know what Ford gives the Browns. So Ford gives you that explosive. Tim said that, I think the Browns, in terms of running back, not only can you get value in the, day 2 and 3, especially into day 3, but you can also get a guy that complements Ford, right? Not a guy who's similar to Ford. They need a hammer. They need a guy who, like I said, for me, that's kind of what I did with my backs today, in my opinion. But he's a really good player. Now, in terms of value, he's a great player. But I still think inside, if you can get a guy with an elite ceiling on the offense or defensive line, that's the route I always go. Always start. You win up front, and without up front, all the other positions don't matter.
Okay, so I think what we're going to do here is we're going to listen to Lance, and I'm going to give my reasoning here, because Tim, you and I don't agree on first of all, which quarterback we should take. I'm going to have trouble getting talked into Jalen Milroe. I see the upside and I see the potential with Jalen Milroe, and I see everything you guys said about Jackson Dart certainly gave me pause last week. And I don't think any of these second tier guys are sure things. I think with any of them, you could be sitting here a year from now still saying who's going to be playing quarterback for this football team. I'm just a little concerned taking Jalen Milroe and putting him with this team that we've kind of seen struggle to be really creative when it's not the type of quarterback that we know Kevin Stefanski is really good with, that can run that play action, just roll out more traditional offense. And, I don't think you can draft for fit at that position. I think you got to draft the best guy, but I think Jalen Milroe and Kevin Stefanski are not a match. And then I think we might be sitting here next year saying, well, now the Browns are looking for a coach and they might still be looking for a quarterback. So anyway, that was my long way of saying that we're going to keep this moving. We're just going to go ahead and listen to Lance. I think we've been very friendly to Lance on these pods.
This is the nicest you two have ever been to me on the mock draft.
Just wait.
We're making up for the last 2 years in 2 weeks.
That's right. Oh, it's coming. I know it's coming.
So
I'll take it when I can get it.
We're moving ahead to number 67 here, and we're getting trade offers that, of course, we're going to reject. So let's see. Here we are at 67. We are on the board, and Tim, we're going to let you pound the table for who you want here first. Some names that might stand out to people: Quinshon Judkins on the board, Elijah Arroyo on the board. There's Caleb Johnson on the board here. Anybody that you kind of want to pound the table for? There's the guy you like at safety, Makuba. We've got Scadaboo. Scadaboo's sitting there at 80. Now let's not forget the Browns do still pick at 94 as well. What do you think, Tim? Who do you want? Who do you want to make your case for right here?
There's a lot of good options. I mean, I would if I could go back a little bit to 33 with where the options are. If the Browns had gone quarterback 2, I'd easily trade out that pick for the best value I could get, because especially if you can move down only 8 or 9 slots, because there were at least 12 guys, I would have been extremely happy with taking there. But then I look at this. I'm just going to live in the world where the Browns passed on quarterback at 2, and then Friday afternoon, like 1 o'clock, they announced they traded for Kirk Cousins,
Fair
and
enough.
then maybe in like round 4, if we get to Kyle McCord, we get there, maybe somebody like that. So I'm gonna basically put that in my mind as like Kirk Cousins, my 2-year stopgap that gives you options to play around with if you don't really like Jalen Milrow, and is gonna pain me to do this because of how much I love Cam Scatterboom. I do think Caleb Johnson is a better running back, and I think it's time to get some. It's time to get a power element in this run game, and I think Caleb Johnson, like I said, there's Le'Veon Bell comps with Caleb Johnson. The fact that he pretty much put that Iowa offense on his back all season long, that he was Iowa's offense and still really productive, tells me that there's a lot to Caleb Johnson. That if you give him any semblance of a threat in the passing game, where he's not going to face 7, 8, 9 man boxes, he's going to be able to get some things done and be very productive.
Lance, I'm on board with this. I think if Caleb Johnson is sitting here at 67, that feels, especially because we already went defensive lineman. We've taken Travis Hunter, so that's our receiver. I just feel like Caleb Johnson is the guy here. I do want to just take a look and see who's still sitting there at receiver. There's our guy Torrey Horton. I mean, it looks like a lot of the best receivers. And if you're not watching this on YouTube and you do want to see this board as we go through, head over to our YouTube and take a look at this segment. But it seems like a lot of the top receivers, or the guys that we really liked day 2, are off the board. We're looking at more day 3 guys. So it kind of, to me, just makes sense. We didn't take, this is the kind of the reason we were giving for not taking Travion Henderson. We could get a good back later. Well, it's later, and there's a good back sitting right there.
Well, first of all, I'm sold because I love Caleb Johnson. So I love him. If I was in the room and we were debating in terms of what we need, we also need a safety. And I really like Xavier Watts on film. He does a really nice job in terms of turnovers, right? He's a guy who can turn the ball over, which was what the Browns defense needs. So that would be my only other argument. But I think there are other safeties that are in the draft, especially with the one high hat that Schwartz likes to play. So I think Caleb Johnson is the right choice here.
That's what we call consensus in the draft room. Caleb Johnson, the pick at number 67. So we've gone Travis Hunter, number 2, Tyleik Williams, 33, Caleb Johnson, 67. Tim has already declared that the Browns have made the trade for Kirk Cousins, so maybe we're not worrying about any of these quarterbacks. For the record, though, when we get to 94, which we just did, we'll take a look at that quarterback group. So you've still got Tyler Shook on the board. You've still got Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, all the typical guys you would expect to still be there at this stage on Friday are there. So we're sitting here at 94. And let's take a look. Well, there's scattered. Can we just double up on running backs, Tim? Do you want to make the case to just build the whole airplane out of running backs here? There's Harold Fannin, who, again, if we end up taking him, we can do that. Lance, why don't you? I'm assuming you would want Fannin here, Lance.
Correct. Yeah, I'm going to go Fannin. I'm going to go a tight end. I could be, I like a lot of the tight ends, but in terms of what the Browns are going to do, and they need playmakers. They need guys who can run after they catch it. So I'm all Fannin here. Going back to 12 personnel, Harold Fannin is the guy.
Tim, anybody you want to make a case for that's not Fannin?
I just looked at him. Kyle Williams from Washington State. I mean, you want to talk about things the Browns don't have. We talked about earlier, they don't have yak guys. They don't have those smaller guys who just run away from defenders and create those extra yards. That's Kyle Williams' game right there. Looking at his numbers from Washington State, almost 1,200 yards last season, 14 touchdowns, kind of that ideal frame that the Browns don't have at receiver, 5'10 and a half, 190 pounds. Not a big guy, but this is a guy who can really just be electrifying when you give him the football. Just one of those easy yards guys. If you're looking for a guy to create those easy yards, that sizzle that I was talking about in offense earlier that the Browns really don't have, I think Kyle Williams really injects some of that sizzle and just more speed at receiver.
Okay, so I've got bad news. This is just gang up on Tim Day, apparently. This is just me and Lance ganging up on Tim. I don't hate the idea. And again, you make the good case there, but I want to come out of this day with a tight end 2, like a legit tight end 2 that I'm going to pencil in to be a starter when we take the field that first week of September. And we're getting to the point here where those guys aren't really left. And like we've talked about, I think there are guys on day 3, even if I need to move around a little bit, I have all those 6th round picks that I can play with and maybe move up and down. I think I can get a receiver that can get me some of those yards and do some of those things on day 3. So, and I'm just going to check here. We'll pull up the receivers as we go through. There's Lance's guy Restrepo. That's not really exactly what we're looking for, but the guy I talked about earlier, Jalen Lane, if I can get him on day 3, he can do some of that stuff for me. So I think there's enough left at receiver on day 3 that I can get that tight end I want, and then maybe try to address receiver on Saturday. So let's find our guy, Harold Fannin, and let's make the pick here at number 94. And so we move ahead to the last pick we're going to make, which is pick number 104. And Tim, we will let you, just so everyone out there knows, Will Howard is, according to this big board, apparently in play, so we can make some of our Ohio State listeners mad here at this point. But Tim, as I scroll through here, Kyle Williams is still on the board, so maybe we can have our cake and eat it too. That's called great draft strategy. What do you think here?
Well, now you heard my bird up there, so he must have heard something going on up there. I assume, based on looking at the board, that Kyle McCord's going.
Let's find out. Kyle McCord is still there.
Oh no, he's there. Yeah. Here's my reasoning for why I would take Kyle McCord right now. Tyler Shuck is not going to be there in round 4. He's probably not going to be there in round 3.
We're taking him off the board then.
Yeah, take him off the board. What I think, you're going to hear my bird squawking. So everybody on YouTube, everybody listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, I apologize for my bird, and I'm gonna talk to him later about this. We're gonna get this sorted out, that we need to have some quiet time hours. Maybe I need to have a soundproof studio. But anyway, I think with Kyle McCord over Will Howard, it's a tough debate, and I think if we want to put it on what they did at Ohio State, obviously you would put Will Howard over Kyle McCord. I don't think there's any question about that. Will Howard won a national championship, and Kyle McCord, did not always look very good at Ohio State in 2023. But we also remember, Kyle McCord did not have Chip Kelly. He did not have that running game that Will Howard had in 2024. And he had it, and I talked about it last week. I really liked his 2024 with Syracuse. I think, you're looking at a guy who maybe has a little bit of Brock Purdy in him because he's got size, some mobility. He understands where he's going with the football. Accuracy is really good. I talked about that game against Miami when he rallied his team back from I think it was a 20-point deficit to beat Cam Ward in Miami. There's plenty I like with Kyle McCord, plus the idea of being a guy who was a 5-star prospect, who has gone through adversity, resurfaced somewhere else, and then been able to have success somewhere else, win 10 games at Syracuse, which is not always an easy thing to do. I think there's something there where if you want to take a chance on a guy who I think is going to have an NFL future in some capacity, I think that's Kyle McCord, even though he doesn't have the running elements that Will Howard does.
Okay, so Lance, I'm guessing you're thinking some other guys here. And as I scrolled through that board, I saw guys that you like, but let me back Tim on this by making this case. The Browns do need to take a quarterback. Even if in this theoretical world they did trade for Kirk Cousins, they're going to have a young quarterback on this roster. The fact that they haven't been urgent about the position or specifically addressed the position tells me that there's a young quarterback coming in some form. And we're sitting here at 104 and don't pick again until 179. That's a lot of picks. If you're looking to add a young quarterback to this roster, you're going to let a lot of picks go by. Now, again, maybe you can use some of those 6ths and move up and trade up and all that, but it gets a little bit dicey if you pass on a quarterback here. Now, last week we had taken the quarterback at 2, so it didn't matter. This week we took Travis Hunter at 2, and we passed on the quarterback at 33. So that would be part of the case that I would make, is we got to play the draft game a little bit here. And if we want to take a quarterback when we get to number 179, I don't know who's going to be left there. I think that 5th round is a prime spot for some of these teams to say, all right, let's take a Kyle McCord. Let's take I don't know if Quinn Ewers is still on the board, but let's take a Quinn Ewers or a Will Howard, or let's take some of these 3rd-tier guys now off of the board. That would be the case for Tim, and maybe why I'd back him.
Well, I see what you guys are selling, and I'm not buying it. And here's why. Because I feel I could be wrong, but I feel like we're in this like pressure, like we got to do it, right? We're in the draft room, and I don't really want to take a guy because we're worried about what's going to be left. Now, that being said, that's why I'm not a GM. That's why they would never want me to be. Because for me, I'm taking guys who are not only high on my list, but guys who fit. And I understand. So for me, it's Billy Bowman in this pick. Why? Because I think he's an outstanding one hi-hat free safety. And if your job's on the line, you better make sure you don't have any holes. And right now, that's a major hole on this on a really good defense. So they played great defense the last 2 years, pretty much, even though they had some issues last year. And they have yet to turn the ball over the last 2 years. So if you're not sure who your quarterback is and you're going to get a bridge guy, then whoever that guy is, I still think through the middle, right? So you're elite. Now you got a big time defensive tackle. You have a linebacker. You have some linebackers. Assuming JOK comes back, you have corners. You're so talented, but you don't have that one high hat. So if they make a mistake, they cannot. They give up a big play and they can't tackle for 20 instead of a touchdown. Billy Bowman is ball hawk at Oklahoma. He's a guy I love. There's a play I have that I posted where he doesn't drop in the goal line, and somebody said to me, he doesn't even move his feet. That's because on the goal line you don't move your feet because you have the back line as the next defender. He's so heady. He understands the game. He had 100+ tackles, and he's 11 picks. I think if you're not sure about the quarterback and you're reaching for straws, then you got to go with guys that fill holes and fill needs, but don't just fill needs, but are high. And I'm higher in Billy Pullman at safety than I am at with Will Howard or McCord at quarterback. Though I do like McCord better than Howard.
Okay, so Lance knows who he's talking to. Lance knows the decision maker he's talking to here, because one of the stats that I love to cite is Grant Delpit and, of course, Juan Thornhill, who is no longer here. You guys probably I don't know if you guys remember the last time either of those guys forced a turnover, so either intercepted a pass or forced a fumble, was the game that Nick Chubb got injured in. Week 2 against Pittsburgh. This has been a safety group that has generally been pretty allergic to forcing turnovers, whether that's fumbles, interceptions. Now, Ronnie Hickman has gotten one. I'm blanking on his name. The safety they brought in who had been with New England and won a Super Bowl in New England and was like 70 years old. He got one in 2023.
Duron Harmon.
Yeah, Duron Harmon. But they have not had true playmaking at the safety position for a while. And I think it's just becoming more and more clear that Grant Delpit, at his best, is going to play down in the box. Now, they're going to move guys. You're not going to be an exclusive in the box safety. You're not going to be an exclusive, you work against the slot, you play free. That's not really how they view it. But they are going to put guys in position most of the time. And I will say, if we're talking about Andrew Berry here, the one thing, Tim, is he's going to take the Lance philosophy. He's not going to be forced to make a pick just to make a pick. So, again, that was the case I made, not the case you made about kind of where you are in the draft and who might be available. That was my case. But I am leaning towards Lance here to go with the safety because Lance is speaking my language and knows how I feel about the Cleveland Browns safety situation. And I think it's worse than people know or people think it is. And the idea of a guy that had 11 interceptions in college is really enticing to me. I'll let you make one more kind of sales pitch here, but that's where I think we're leaning here in this fake Browns draft room.
Well, if it's not going to be quarterback for me, I'll make my thoughts on this pretty clear. I would still go offense. I mean, again, by DVOA, you had one of the worst offenses DVOA's ever measured in 2024. You had the 12th worst DVOA offense. If you take out the Jameis games, it was the worst that DVOA has ever measured. That goes back to at least 1970. Now, I'm going to make the case again that if it's not quarterback, it's Kyle Williams for me. Again, if you can't find the young quarterback, the next best thing you could do is build the airplane around that quarterback, whatever you get. And right now you have an airplane which is got some offensive linemen, either veteran guys or guys who can be really good right now. Depth is a question there, so that's why I would be at least interested in Wyatt Milam from West Virginia as a potential guard. I think he's got power right there, more competition for Zach Zinter. But again, you're in the AFC North right now. People say that's a defensive division. I contend that's an offensive division right now because you have Cincinnati. They have probably the NFL's most expensive offense right now with the money that they just gave Joe Burrow, the money that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins just got. Baltimore, you've got a backfield that set the NFL record for yards per carry as a team last season. Pittsburgh, I know there's questions about who's going to be the quarterback, but with George Pickens and DK Metcalf for at least one season, you can have an average quarterback and those two guys have a good shot to make it better. The Browns, I think you got to find a way to close the gap at skill positions. I know you got Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku who are both very good. I think Caleb Johnson can be a very good running back. I don't think you can stop there. It's an arms race. And if there's one thing I would say about Andrew Berry's draft record, he has not used enough high draft capital on offense. 5 picks in the first 2 rounds. One of them was on offense, and that was Jed Wills Jr., and he's not on the roster anymore. It's time to go load up on offense because I think I talked about this on Sports CLE yesterday. As much as, the Browns have had a good defense in 2023, the reality is defense has such high variance in comparison to offense. That's what we saw in 2024. The defense was amazing in 2023, took a step back in 2024, probably bigger because the offense couldn't do anything. And I mean, they could hardly do anything outside of the Jameis games where they looked like they looked like a pretty solid NFL offense at times. So I think if you are looking for the quarterback, and I think Kirk Cousins can, or maybe Kenny Pickett, if you really believe in him, could help stabilize things to figure out what you're going to do at quarterback. But if you don't have that young quarterback, get the weapons. Do what Green Bay did. I think it was 2023. I'm not saying draft 3 receivers in back-to-back-to-back picks. I'm not saying draft 2 tight ends on day 2, but I'm saying get yourself some offense. And I know you have Travis Hunter. Keep going. Just add to it and get electrifying players.
Tim, that was a great case. That was
You're welcome.
That was awesome. That was great. The only mistake you made is that if you would have been like, I'm a little worried about David Njoku, then you would have really gotten my attention. But Lance, we're going to go with Billy Bowman. Sorry, I don't know. There's something enticing about adding to that safety room. But Tim, I don't disagree with you. I mean, this offense was bad last year, and we can't ignore how bad it actually was. And I think it does run deeper than just, they didn't have a quarterback. I think that was a big part of it. But I also think this speaks a little bit to the idea of this roster kind of in general just needs infusions of young talent all over the place, which is why we can sit here and make a really good case for Billy Bowman and a really good case for just piling up offensive weapons. So again, Tim, this was a tough draft for you. Your job is safe as a scout here in our front office. You made great cases. Thank you. I was moved by that closing statement there. So don't worry. You don't have to go calling up the Baltimore Ravens, seeing if they're hiring scouts or whatever. We're keeping you around. But
if I can make 2 points, I will say first, in the middle of my impassioned rant about the offense, I forgot they took Travis Hunter. I don't know how I forgot about Travis Hunter, but
it's funny we didn't talk about it. We just made the pick. We didn't even spend any time on it, so that's why.
Oh yeah, so I'm like, oh yeah, they have Travis Hunter. They have your easy yards guy right there, and I'm like, all right, why not more? I'm selfish in that way where I want skill position. Like, give me as much as you could possibly muster. So that's kind of where I am on it. Number 2, how can I feel that bad when I overrode everybody and just gave a 2026 5th round pick for Kirk Cousins and 1/3 of his salary?
That's right. And I don't even want Kirk Cousins. So like you've really gone off the board. You like went rogue and went and traded for Kirk Cousins without my knowledge. So there you go. Okay, our final not our final mock draft, our final segment here, mock draft. We led with Travis Hunter, took Tyleik Williams, Caleb Johnson at 67, Harold Fannin at 94, and Billy Bowman at 104. Next week, we got one more of these. We are going to go live again. It'll be around this same time. Just pay attention to our socials and all of that for an exact time, 6 or 6:30. We'll go live on our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. We're going to talk about a number of defensive guys, but we're really going to focus on the defensive line. And I do kind of want to I threw this out to Lance, Tim, but make a note of this. As you sit and watch guys, sometimes you see other guys and you're like, man, I really like him. And you go on the team's roster. Oh, he's a freshman. He's a sophomore. Okay. I want to hear some future guys that you guys have noticed as we've gone through that process. I think that'll be a fun little segment to just throw out some future names for people to keep an eye on. Like I said, our YouTube is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Our Instagram is Orange and Brown Talk. Our Twitter is just Orange Brown Talk. No and, just Orange Brown Talk. Please give us a follow over there. Just started using it a couple weeks ago. And if you're not a Football Insider subscriber, I know a few of you were in our chat here on YouTube, so we appreciate that. Cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner to get involved in that. Tim and Lance, fun as always. I will talk to you guys later. Everybody out there, thanks for